Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader. And today we're going to talk about the power of executive presence for women in tech leadership. And I have the pleasure of speaking with Robin Camarote, a leadership development trainer and coach. And Robin will share her insights on how executive presence can propel women to greater insights in their career. Hi, Robin. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm so happy to be here. It's great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you too. And Robin, let's dive right in. So can you share with our listeners the key elements of executive presence and how it can be a game changer for women, especially the very male-dominant field like in the tech industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll share my perspective and a little bit of background. So today I am a leadership trainer and an executive coach, as you said, but I didn't start here. So when I started my career, I was a consultant. I was working directly with clients here, mostly federal clients in the US. And and that work was intense and it was stressful at times, but it was a really great way to get exposure to a whole range of leadership styles and how people show up. So I would kind of take away things that I really admired and things that I wanted to do kind of in my own career, as well as things that I didn't like that much or see as effective. And I will tell you that I learned, a lot the hard way. So I think if anybody out there feels like they're struggling right now with this or just not really showing up as confidently or with the presence that they want, I would just tell them you are not alone. So I very much felt like this. So my very first thing I would want to share is that executive presence is a skill and it's something that we can learn. So if you are under the impression that some people just have it and others don't, that is not the case at all. I would just tell you from my firsthand experience and what I've seen, in so many of my clients, that once you kind of break it down into the component skills, you can work on those and really make a huge difference in how you show up. So I just would start there. I would also share, my perspective on kind of what executive presence is. The definition can be one of those squishy things that like, well, I kind of know it when I see it and it's kind of hard to pin down. But I think about it in kind of three components: the ability to lead yourself, the ability to lead others, and thought leadership. So it's kind of those three components coming together. And the reason that I think about it that way is that your presence is very much about how you show up and your ability to have impact, command a room, convey your ideas articulately, and really move people forward. And so that to me is what it's all about. But to do that, it's not just kind of, how you speak in a meeting, but it's really in terms of that bit about being able to lead yourself, understanding the emotions and that what's kind of happening inside your body and being able to kind of manage yourself and have that self-awareness. So I think that's really important. The second thing about leading others is understanding your audience, understanding what people kind of need to hear, what they're looking to hear, and how you kind of where they are so that you can, kind of give them kind of the language and the background that they need to move forward. And the third piece about thought leadership is having a point of view. So one of the things about executive presence is that you're able to take a stand on something and how you feel about it. Now, that doesn't always mean that you have the answer, but it does mean that you have a perspective. You have values against which you can test ideas, you can test, and kind of come up with your own solutions, but you have a perspective. And so that's what I would just say. To me, it's the ability to lead yourself, lead others, and be a thought leader.
All right. So how do you even start? So I know that everyone wants to have like an executive presence. Everyone want everyone to respect them and kind of swipe people after them. But how do you even get started with that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And so I like to kind of break things down into very manageable pieces because it can feel overwhelming, especially if you see someone you admire and you're like, how am I ever going to get from where I am to where they are? So breaking it down into the kind of just a place to start, I think the first thing is really tuning in to what's going on in your mind and in your body when you're in these various settings at work. And sometimes it's hard to do that in the moment, but if you have a regular journaling practice, or you just have a couple minutes a day where you can sit quietly and really reflect on, how did I feel in this moment? What was going on? What was I concerned about? What was I worried was going to happen? What was I excited about? So really just building that self-awareness about how you feel in each setting. And what's remarkable is when I talk to people, I'm working with a client right now who is incredibly confident and articulate with his team. In this case, it's a man, but he can show up just and feel great, feel like himself when he is with his peers and with his staff. But when he joins the senior leadership, he falls apart. He's gotten feedback that he's stumbling over his words. It's hard to understand him. He gets so nervous that he feels heart palpitations, this whole thing. Part of that is because, he has a story in his mind about how high risk it is for him to brief the senior leadership team that it doesn't exist at all with his staff. So he has this different emotional experience in both settings. So just building that awareness of how you feel in each given setting, do that through journaling or through some quiet moments just in reflection or meditation. I think the second piece is know what you want to say. We often show up at a meeting and just plan on winging it. Or, we go into a one-on-one session with a direct report, and we just plan to kind of respond to whatever questions they have. So much of our confidence in speaking is having a clear idea about what we want to say and just kind of jotting it down in very rough bullet points, or just having something written down where you've thought just even 5 minutes ahead of time. What's the main point I want to be able to articulate? What do I want to get out of this meeting? What do I want to convey? Where do we want to leave at the end? So just having that, just a couple minutes, kind of write down your thoughts and what you want to say. I also suggest that anytime you're going into a situation where you think there might be back and forth Q&A, this can be incredibly stressful. And oftentimes somebody who has strong executive presence feels like it kind of falls apart when they get into a more dynamic dialogue. So the truth is, though, often we can't anticipate the kinds of questions that we're going to get. Not everything, certainly, but you can kind of guess the general gist of it. So I think it's helpful, in addition to knowing what you want to say, to jot down a couple of questions that you think you might get and how you're going to respond. Again, it doesn't mean that you have to have an answer to everything or be able to answer something that you're not ready to, but just knowing how you're going to respond, so you have that ready in the back of your mind when it comes up. Can just be a tremendous confidence boost. The third thing people can do is ask for feedback. And, I think a lot of times we have an impression of how we come across in a meeting or in a one-on-one. But what we perceive to be the reality isn't necessarily what other people perceive. So identifying a trusted person who can observe you in action and with kindness and with empathy and without judgment can kind of just share their observations so that you have a sense of what somebody else thinks, just to bounce against your own. Often I find, at least with my clients, that people are much more harsh or critical of themselves than they actually come across in real life. So having just that other perspective to ground truth, what you're thinking, will help you better define what those specific items are that you want to work on. Mm-hmm. So I think some journaling, I think thinking ahead of time what you want to say, and finding a way to get some feedback that you could trust. I think those are three ways to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great tips. And I actually had a client that was trying to kind of prepare themselves for every question they can be asked or every scenario. So it's kind of sometimes can be a slippery slope if you try too much to be scriptive about how the meeting is going to go and you don't always know.
Right. No, I think you're exactly right. Certainly not to obsess about it or spend hours, trying to anticipate, but especially for a tech audience where you can feel, on the hook to have all of the answers. I mean, the kind of work that, that this group does is just incredibly complex. It changes often. There's, it's just incredibly dynamic. And so I think women, particularly in this environment, sometimes feel this pressure, like, I have to know all the things. And I would really challenge that and say, you certainly, need to have a handle on kind of your area of responsibility, what's going on actively in your projects right now. But it's absolutely demonstrating strong executive presence to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to get back to you. I know how to find out. Or, give me a moment to, think about it, and we'll circle back. There is absolutely nothing wrong with saying you don't know, if you can just say it with confidence and assure them that you'll be able to circle back and get them the answer, when you're ready.
Absolutely. And this is actually, I see that as a great strength,
Mm-hmm.
saying that you don't know something.
Right. Oh, I totally agree.
Yeah. And what kind of strategies do you give people to handle anxiety and stress? So one of the things I know I had in my career, like, I was really anxious before going to a meeting with executives. And as you mentioned, right, I mean, a lot of the time it's just the stress that is affecting the whole way you show up in a meeting. Do you have some strategies to kind of reduce that level of stress so you can be more yourself and not like, like
I know. I mean, like, I was just listening. So I'm a huge fan of this podcast, but also of other ones. I was listening to one this morning that was talking about our brain's inability to kind of differentiate between true danger and what we perceive to be danger, like a stressful meeting. Like, our brain kind of sees those as like one and the same, and we have that intense that anxiety, that physical response that triggers that, fight or flight. So it's interesting you brought it up. I was just thinking about this morning. So I think there's kind of two things, and I wish I had the magic pill for this. I really do, because it certainly affects me. It affects, you just said it affects you, it affects so many of us, where we have this anxiety happening that then just becomes a barrier to doing the work that we want to do or having the impact that we want. And that's so frustrating and so upsetting, especially when it happens over and over again. So I think there's two things to this. And again, I don't think these are the magic pill. I wish I had it. I don't. But the first one is, I think there's some perspective setting that can happen. So if we can find some time ahead when we know we're going into a stressful situation, just to try to bring the stakes down a little bit and just kind of put things in perspective. This is just one meeting out of a dozen that we're going to have on this topic, or it's, these are all humans, and, they know that I'm doing my best. Like, so any self-talk that you can do ahead of time, just to like bring the energy down a little bit and add some perspective. Like, very little of what we do in IT, it's important. So don't get me wrong. It's really not life or death. Like, really, we're doing important work, but fortunately nobody's going to die because of a slip schedule or something like that. So bringing some of that perspective in. The second thing I think is can be useful is letting anxiety be there and not actually pushing and resisting against it or making it a problem. Just knowing that when I go into this particular setting, my nerves are going to be up, but I'm not going to judge myself harshly for being anxious about that, because it exacerbates the problem. It just makes it worse. So if we just kind of know that's going to happen and not try to push it away, it can help us kind of settle down into just a more normal emotional state.
I love that. And I really believe in mindfulness. It goes a long way. And a lot of times, when I was like, especially in leadership, when I knew that I was going to situations that were not comfortable, maybe there is a conflict or some unpleasant conversation, I was just talking to myself and saying, okay, it's not going to be pleasant. I know it's going to be hard, but still I'm going to take on this challenge. So just this talking to myself about it just helped me, consciously going into a situation that I know it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I love that. I mean, and that's exactly what we want, right? We don't want our worries and our anxiety to get in the way of all of the things, all the amazing things that you want and need to accomplish. And so I think that's a perfect example of what people can do is, yes, I'm feeling this way. I'm going to acknowledge it, and I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to do it even though I'm anxious. So, and then I think over time you can kind of build up some of that confidence and just, it can dissipate some, but, I talk to people now and I know for myself, it never goes away completely.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, I mean, we don't have to do it all by ourselves, right? I mean, there's so many people who can help us. So can you share a little bit like, okay, let's say you understand that you're getting in your own way of getting to executive presence. What kind of support should you look for?
Yeah, so I love that message. And I think oftentimes as women, we do feel, especially at work, that we kind of need to figure it out. And if you're working with, a lot of other people who don't look like you, or might be a different age, or, different gender, or whatever, it can feel very isolating, and it can be reluctant to kind of reach out for help. I do think that in almost every environment, there is, someone there that you can trust and you can start building that relationship with, and to be that kind of trusted advisor to you that not only will provide some feedback, but also might be able to do some coaching or mentoring in the moment and kind of give you some tips. So I would say, look for those people that you trust, in your immediate setting. And, I almost kind of think about it like, like a target. There's like that kind of inner circle, and then there's an outer layer. So having somebody that knows you well and who is in your immediate environment is going to be able to give you the kind of the most precise guidance and feedback. There's a layer outside of that might be coaches or trainers or, other people providing support. A layer out from that is, resources like this, where you're part of a broader community of, women in IT that are maybe struggling with the same things and kind of reaching out. So you want a blend of relationships across like all of those spectrums, those that are close and that know you, as well as those that have maybe an outside perspective that can offer you some, a path out. So.
Yeah, for sure. And I know many people helped me, right? I mean, people that I trusted and knew me helped me, both internal and also sometimes external. So definitely you don't have to do everything by yourself.
Right. Oh, so true.
And I'll be happy to kind of hear, I mean, if you're willing to share, what helped you, overcome challenges when you had like that, when you wanted to grow your career.
Yeah. So there are a couple things, whether at the time, I don't know that I was doing this intentionally, but to keep showing up. And so on this idea of, being anxious, but doing it anyway, earlier in my career, I got myself into situations where I would raise my hand or volunteer for a role that then led to something that made me uncomfortable. And I would almost like volunteer before I really thought it all the way through. And maybe that's a benefit, but I would kind of make a commitment that then I had to follow through. So I found myself in situations where I was just forced to present, forced to kind of show up. And I think muddling through those and getting the hard lessons learned ended up kind of being beneficial. It was painful at the time. And I distinctly remember 2 or 3 conference presentations where, I didn't get off on the right note, which sometimes that first sentence out of your mouth, if you kind of stumble or if you lose your place, can make it feel like the rest of the presentation is not going to go well. And that happened to me, so I remember being in that situation in front of a crowded room, a whole audience, and just not knowing what to say next, and really feeling like almost like I couldn't speak. So, but continue to put yourself in those kind of uncomfortable situations, I think, can help, because they do build up some of that stamina and that strength over time to find out what works for you. So I think that's one thing. And then I also have had a tremendous network of mentors and of coaches and people to provide feedback that, you can take what's useful to you from those conversations, leave the rest, but continue to find ways to grow. I mean, really adopting a growth mindset around your executive presence, kind of going back to that initial point that this is a skill. Anyone can learn it. Wherever you are with it, you can always always improve. And so adopting that growth mindset, taking as much feedback as you can, and trying new things.
Yes, absolutely. Yes to all of that. And you mentioned public speaking. I'm a great believer in public speaking. That is a wonderful tool to grow your confidence. And it's important, I think, for
Mhm.
every, for everyone, and especially if you want to grow in your career and
Mhm.
get to executive roles, you need to know how to speak.
Right? Oh yeah. It's unavoidable. So you're going to find yourself, no matter what role you take on, you're going to find yourself at some point in front of an audience that makes you nervous, and kind of being able to pull yourself together and convey your message is part of the work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what do you think, Robin, are the major barriers for women specifically to advance themselves?
Well, I think there are very real barriers in terms of the bias that we
Mhm.
encounter at work. And it can be more intense in certain disciplines, and I think IT is one of those. So I think that's very real. It and to some extent, some of that's out of our control. So we can, be part of kind of larger change movements and really advocate for women. But what I like to do is focus on what's in our control and how we view things. So I think being mindful of those barriers you're putting in front of yourself, and trying to remove them. So like going back to your point about public speaking, I so often bump into people or work with people that say, "Oh no, I can't speak in front of a group. That's just not for me." So that kind of self-talk is shutting down that experience. And so really listening to yourself about where you have limiting beliefs about your abilities and kind of what you can do, and just tuning that out, getting rid of it. Like nobody on this call, if you do nothing else, please never say to yourself that you can't speak in front of a group, or you don't want to, or it makes you, just like eliminate that whole language from yourself, because it does put up a barrier to our ability to really grow and find ways to progress. So I think the other barriers are, there's just simply fewer opportunities, and so being as opportunistic as you possibly can and not discriminating against any stage. They're all, it's all practice and it's all really worthwhile. So anytime you have an opportunity to get up in front of a group, share your ideas, whether that's in a staff meeting or a project team meeting or a conference, but really, making the space, for women like yourself or your colleagues to really kind of claim their position and really say what they need to say.
Absolutely. And before we end, I mean, what kind of advice would you like to leave our listeners with?
Well, I will end where I started, with just a really an encouragement to think about this as a skill or a muscle that you can strengthen no matter where you are. Even if you are just tremendously confident and love the way you show up, there's always like a little bit more room for improvement. I kind of think about it like our writing. There's always room to improve. But if you feel like you're struggling right now, again, you're not alone. This is something that you can improve. Start with something small and just really notice that progress, and where you're feeling more confident, and you're feeling like, okay, I knew what I wanted to say and I nailed it, and they listened, and now we've taken a different path as a result. Like just really claiming those wins for yourself, because it fuels that next step, and it really will encourage you to continue on your path to growth.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much, Robin. And how can people reach out to you? How can they contact you?
Oh, well, I love it. I love anyone who wants to reach out on LinkedIn. You can find me at Robin Camarote. I think that's the best place to find me. And yeah, I would love to hear from anybody, and let's connect.
Yeah, great. I'll put the link to your LinkedIn on the show notes. Thank you
Mhm.
so much, Robin, for being here today. It was a
Yes,
pleasure.
yes, thank you so much.